Hey y'all, Mike here from allamerican.org, and today we are driving up to Mount Airy, North Carolina to go and visit Nestor Hosiery. Mount Airy is a pretty cool town. It's about 10,000 people or so on the border of North Carolina and Virginia. They have a rich history in textile manufacturing, furniture, nearby granite quarry, and also home to Nestor Hosiery, which you may know better as Farm to Feet Socks. They actually got started in Dobson, North Carolina in 1993, moved their headquarters to Mount Airy in 2002, where they have expanded a ton and really invested in the local community. So today we are doing an exclusive behind-the-scenes tour of their manufacturing process and facility, learning a lot more about the company and Farm to Feet Socks, which are 100% made in USA wool socks from materials to manufacturing and finishing. So the tour is not until about 2 o'clock this afternoon, so we have plenty of time this morning to go and explore Mount Airy and knock out a little bit of work. Hey y'all, Mike here from allamerican.org, and today I am here with Matt from Nestor Hosiery. Matt, thanks for having me.
Pleasure to be here, Mike.
Awesome. Well, we are super excited to take a tour of Nestor Hosiery today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who Nestor Hosiery is and what y'all do?
Sure thing. So Nestor Hosiery is the bigger company that owns the manufacturing facility here, and it's multi-generational, family-owned. Been making socks for over 30 years. And the brand Farm to Feet that I oversee, my team is focused on 100% US manufacturing. We've always made socks here, but a lot of the materials have come from around the world because the biggest merino farms are in New Zealand and Australia. And so that yarn gets made and then brought to make things. And 10 years ago, we identified an opportunity that we could get merino wool from the US and kind of create our own supply chain right here. And then we started piecing together and figured out we could get all of our materials from here, including our packaging, including the majority of the materials we use for our trade shows, and all the things that you would typically use to create a consumer brand, we can do it right here in the US. So fast forward 10 years, next year in October, we'll celebrate our 10-year anniversary. And we've got some special sock designs and promotions that we're going to be doing to highlight not only what we do, but our supply chain. So over the years, working with the different factories that make the yarn or dye the yarn, we know every step of the way. And so the brand means exactly that, Farm to Feet. We know the route that travels to move through, and so we're completely vertically integrated in regards to that.
Tell me a little bit about y'all's impact on the local community around Mount Airy. What has been y'all's mission and kind of footprint here locally, and how many folks do y'all have around the area, and really, you know, what's been kind of the way that y'all support the community?
The factory has ebbed and flowed over the years. We actually have this facility here that we're sitting in. We've got a building across the street and another building down the road. So we do warehousing. We have our own retail store. At any given time, we employ around 300 people, and that's going to be factory-wide, doing all facets of manufacturing, shipping, design. And you know, for us, the Carolinas, Surry County, Mount Airy especially, is rich with textile history and all aspects of the supply chain. In Surry County, to my knowledge, we're one of the last fully operational knitting facilities that does full production here.
Yeah.
So you used to have really big companies, and they have moved production elsewhere. I could be more specific, but I'll just say elsewhere. They've moved production elsewhere, and you know, it's difficult. It's difficult to employ people with the skill set to do some of these jobs because they're highly specialized.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of internal teaching and mentorship for people to move up, because you can have a career in this industry at every level of the company. And so we're constantly doing hiring. We've got multi-generational families that have worked here. And so the impact on the community, you walk anywhere down Main Street in Mount Airy and say, oh, I work at Nestor Hosiery, and they know and probably know someone who still works here or used to work here.
It's funny, I have a good friend where I live who's from Mount Airy, and I mentioned to her when I was coming up this morning that I was going to visit with Nestor Hosiery, and her face lit up. She was like, no way! Yep. Everybody knows Nestor Hosiery around here, so it's amazing just the profound impact that you'll have on the local community, not to mention just broader American suppliers.
It's so much broader, and it goes, you know, when we started the brand, we had this goal to purchase as many of our materials within 150 miles. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of that can be done still today. There's sheep farms all over the country. The American sheep industry has around 1,500 farmers. And so some of the wool is definitely sheared elsewhere in the country, but it's brought down to the Southeast to be turned into yarn, Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And so we've steadfast to that goal of 150 miles. And it's interesting for me and my team to go explore that supply chain, to see those facilities and then hear their story that they've got multi-generational families that are working in a packaging facility, doing one simple thing, making a package so socks can hang. And then they make packaging for hundreds, if not thousands of other clients. Right. So I got asked a question recently, how many people does it take to make a pair of socks? Mm-hmm. And it's probably one of the most difficult questions to answer, simply because you have to go all the way back to the start of the supply chain and probably count the sheep too, because we wouldn't have merino wool without that sheep. Exactly. And so you start there and you go through, it comes from the farm, goes to a process where it's cleaned, goes to a factory where it's turned into yarn, goes to another factory where it might be dyed, finally makes it here. Mm-hmm. There's easily 60 people here that are going to be involved in that process, because we have those people that are specialized. And so one person might set up the program on the machine, another person might set up the yarns on the machine, another person might take it from the machine to the washer or the dryer, and then to the boarding, and then to the packaging, and then to the warehouse, and the guy that loads it on the truck, and then the guy at the retail store that takes it out and hangs it on the wall. I mean, there are so many people that touch a pair of socks before you can walk into a store and say, that's the one I want. And after y'all get all the materials in here, pretty much every part of the sock manufacturing process happens in this facility. Right in these four walls, Amazing. So we're excited to take a tour of it. Yeah, let's do it. Awesome, let's go. Every sock starts with a designer. And so they actually work on a computer and design things in 2D. Mm-hmm. And then eventually that 2D will make it potentially to a 3D. So we have a cool piece of software and technology where we can 3D render a sock. And that does a number of things. It allows us to see the sock in 3D, to really zoom in to, like, what is that cow gonna look like when it's actually on a sock, rather than a high definition pixelated screen. And then we can do rapid prototyping in that respect, so that if I said, okay, well, I wanna see these 3 socks in 7 different colors, I don't have to physically knit those. And it's a much easier way to work with customers in the design process, so that you're not creating waste, because there's a lot of cost and obvious materials that go into every single sock that's made. And so by the time we're knitting, we want to go very quickly to production. Mm-hmm. So we don't like to knit a lot of socks we don't intend to make. Yeah. So we run 3 shifts at the factory. We run 6 days a week, essentially. And what they do before every shift starts is they've got a very systematic way to know what yarns are needed to go onto the machinery. And so they're pulling yarn from the warehouse back here, putting it into very specific baskets, so that when they pull it down, I know this sock is going to have purple in it, it's going to have really bright blue, it's going to have some gray, and that's everything to knit a batch, which is probably 100 dozen. Yep. Everything back here is kind of measured in dozens, and so that yarn is pre-packed from there, and then someone will actually move it over to a cart here, so it's easily accessible to move straight from the machine and just get that machine up and running. Yeah. We have a bunch of types of machines. We can knit socks that are really thick and bulky, like a rag sock. We can knit really thin, like technical performance socks. So kind of as we go down the line, you'll see a lot of different colors up above, because every sock coming out is probably going to be constructed a little differently. Some of the machines are really pretty old. So we've got San Giacomo machines,
We've got Lenati machines. We'll pop back into another room that those are some of our oldest machines, but the beauty is that we have people who are trained to take care of these machines and keep them running. And some of these machines are 20 years or more. So kind of just going down the line, you'll see all the vacuum hoses and everything up above, and you hear that background noise. Everything operates on a vacuum to pull air through the machine so that the yarns are pulled down and all the little parts that are clipped off get sucked up, and we collect those and recycle those. And I'll show you where that is in the back. So kind of moving on down the line, we get down here. These are some of our newer machines. These are 200 needle machines where a lot of our farm to feet socks are made. And so when a sock comes out, it's got quite a bit of stretch to it because the Lycra hasn't really set in. But you see all the yarns up on top, put through. The machine itself is a cylinder that's spinning very, very fast. And what it does is, you'll see over here on the side, is in this tube up here, the sock is actually turned inside out, and then the toe seam is knit. And so as soon as that toe seam is closed off, it's gonna suck that sock up and spit it out down in that basket. And at the same time, the next sock is already knitting in the machine. So technically it can make 2 socks at once. More specifically, it can knit a sock and then finish a sock at the same time. So you get better efficiency. So there it went, and boom, it's gonna drop right down into there. There's a sock. So this just kind of gets a little quieter. Comes through, so some socks need to be washed with an older technique. And so we have 100-pound and 400-pound washers. All of our water is recollected and captured, so it's a closed loop system. And we use very little heat, so everything's washed in cold to save energy. So these machines are some of the oldest, and they knit some of our rag socks. So like your old kind of traditional type of sock you would wear like at a cabin or something out in the woods. And the yarns are really thick and really chunky. And you can see that they're twisted together, and we actually do some of our own twisting right over here. And then what you see is like these yarn cones are tied together. And sometimes you'll have 3, 4, 5, 6 cones, because the idea is you turn the machine on, and as long as there's no malfunction, the machine can run and run and run and run until it runs out of yarn. And so as opposed to letting it run till 1 cone's gone, you'll put multiple cones, and when it finishes a cone, that tie, it just pulls that next one straight in to keep knitting socks. That's how you achieve the efficiency in manufacturing. So all of our machines are set up to do it that way. There's definitely some specialty tiles. You know, we do a lot of private label manufacturing for customers and design work. And maybe there's a timeline for when they start to do a lot of their development or think about developments. But for our Farm to Feet brand, we're on a pretty regular cadence. We have 2 seasons, spring and summer, fall and winter. We always release a new season of socks. So those are the times of year. Just point out that, you know, along with all of the energy savings that we do with lighting and water and wastewater, all our cardboard, all the plastic that is just inherent in the industry, everything is captured and recycled through our facility. And then we have some 53-foot tractor trailers sitting out here where we put any kind of waste, so post-production waste, the scraps that get pulled off that I'll show you back here. That goes down to another facility that's close by and chopped up and can be used for other things, can be turned into other yarns and materials. And we're looking at eventually down the line actually using that scrap and turning it back into yarn that we could knit socks. So completely closed loop. Turning, you see all the signs up here, and then seaming. So, you know, a lot of the socks, depending on the type of machine, it might come out without a toe sewn. So it has to be turned inside out and then go through seaming to have the toe seam put on. And that's some of the older machines before the technology was available and they couldn't be retrofit with a toe closure right on the machine. So again, just kind of constant workflow, multiple shifts a day, people can come in and out. There are certain functions at the factory that only happen during certain shifts, but otherwise pretty much all teams are running all the time. So then here we're getting pretty close to the final steps. we've got a lot of materials and a lot of programs that don't require any washing. So we have steam tumblers, and so it uses very little water and very little energy, and it expedites the process to set the yarns in the sock to get the shape that we're looking for. People expect the sock to look kind of like a sock. However, most customers want the sock in the package to be nice and flat, look all pretty. And so the process that we go through to do that is called boarding. So these machines here are steam boarding, where the socks are pulled over the top and pressed so that they're nice and flat. And we'll show you over here how they get stacked up. So that also makes them easy to go through inspection, and it also makes them much easier to package. You can imagine if you were reaching into a big bin and grabbing socks that weren't all nice and flat, it would be hard to package that. So this is just an extra step that makes the whole process easier for the people involved. A lot of our socks are still packaged by hand. So we have a big section and workers that are very good at what they do, packaging socks quickly and efficiently. So you can see how quickly and nicely it can look once everything's kind of pressed and boarded. And then also what that allows is, by this point, at least 4 people have touched that sock physically, so they've had an opportunity to look at it, to see if there's anything that looks wrong, all kinds of quality control. And then when they're matching them up here through boarding, they're actually looking at consistency to make sure that the sizing is consistent, because we knit in different batches of sizes. And so that way, what the customer gets every time is going to be the same. So we'll just kind of cut through here right down the middle. And so this is staging. So everything comes out from boarding, and you get to see where everything's getting lined up for people to batch it for packaging. A lot of our customers have specific packaging that they need the socks put into. They have specific size labels. So it's really up to the customer how they want that packaged. And then once the socks are packed either into, typically what we see is either 3 pairs or 6 pairs bundled together, they can go through an auto bagger. And so that's where they're sealed and protected for storage and shipping. The last thing we'll do is kind of cut around, give you an idea of what some of the warehouse space looks like to store all of this. And keep in mind, this is the main production facility that has a small warehouse. The main warehouse is across the street and down the street. So we actually operate warehousing out of 3 different facilities. Because believe it or not, socks take up a lot of space, especially when you've got big customers ordering, dozens or thousands of dozens. If we take into account everything that we make physically here, we're knitting well into the millions. Yeah, farm to feet is less than that. But I can tell you, starting from this aisle all the way down to that wall and back, this is farm to feet, this is farm to feet, this is farm to feet. Basically, as far as you can see, we occupy about 12 of our full racks. And so this is where, you would come in and you would say, oh, a customer wants, 3 pairs of those in size large, throw those in the box, 3 pairs of those in size medium. Maybe they want a couple pairs of these, some hunting, fishing socks. And so our people have carts and scanners. And so everything's computerized. So they know, all right, I'm going to start at this end and I'm going to basically zigzag through. So by the time I get to the end, I've picked everything for that customer. And so it's just looking for efficiencies. It would be pretty maddening to walk back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. If there's something that comes up and they come and get all the yarns to put on the machine and they have a question, there's multiple people that they can physically find to ask a question. Yeah. And then there's also a very high emotional investment into it. And so people might just be out on the floor and it's not even their job responsibility on paper, but they're invested to notice things and call it to someone else's attention. Right. So you have a lot of that commingling between departments. And between shifts and people that might work first shift, second shift, third shift. Just kind of a good shot there of just how wild some of the colors can be. So this is actually the sample department. So this is where we have smaller sections of cones and yarn so that we can just run test stuff before we actually make a large purchase. That brings us back to where we started. There's a lot of stuff that's tracked. I mentioned that a lot of things are electronic. These machines are highly highly sophisticated. And so a lot of it's tracked electronically on these different computers, and people have iPads on each aisle. And they track a lot of metrics like how the machine's running, the efficiency of the machine, was there a yarn breakage or a needle breakage. And a lot of these skills, they're not taught in school.
Oh, yeah.
And I mentioned that earlier when we first started talking. It's so important for our management and our shift leads to be inspiring people to want to learn more and know more, because we're not going to be able to hire someone from down the road. We're not going to be able to poach someone from another company because it just doesn't exist.
Knowledge is passed down.
It's passed down.
Yeah.
We'll sneak on back.